Remember that one of the social determinants of health is something called early childhood development. And one of the things that can promote healthier early childhood development is having a consistent and enjoyable and healthy physical activity practice. So in this section, I want to talk about physical activity for children and youth. We'll look at the recommendations and we'll look at some of the things that can help promote physical activity in these groups and some of the benefits of that. So again, importance of physical activity for anyone is just, I laugh because there's just so much. Like, where do you even begin on the benefits of physical activity? Having a good physical activity practice when someone is young may help reduce the risk of chronic disease later on in life. It can, of course, help improve bone health, especially during those critical periods where bone is being laid down, where endochondral ossification is happening and our bones are getting longer, for instance. It can help improve fitness, it can help improve quality of life, motor skill advantage, motor skill development, more focus and cognitive improvements as far as school performance goes, better school performance, period. There's psychological well-being, helps people make friends, has these pro-social behaviors, it's so much. There's so many potential benefits of physical activity for children and youth. As far as whether children who are physically active always become adults that are physically active, the research is it does suggest that there is at least a small to moderate effect. So there might be an increase. There is evidence to suggest that there is an increased likelihood of adult physical activity with childhood and youth physical activity, but it kind of depends, and it doesn't necessarily predict adult physical activity. And just to support this, there was this 20-year-old tracking study in Finnish boys and girls where they used self-report, so imperfect at that. And what they found is that there was kind of this low to moderate correlation between childhood physical activity and adult physical activity. But one thing that was particularly interesting about this is that the children that had persistent physical activity practices, so over 3 years of persistent physical activity, had a much higher odd, 4.3 to 7. They were 4.3 to 7 times more likely in males and 3 to 5.6% more likely in females to be active adults. And those numbers, those odds ratios got even more stronger, right, higher in people that had persistent physical activity practices of 6 years. So whether childhood physical, I would say one-off physical activity or a little bit of physical activity here and there in children and youth might not be as predictive of adult physical activity as this persistent physical activity practice. And this is something as as parents, maybe future parents, maybe as childcare people, as school teachers, as just members of the community. This is something a joy and a love for physical activity and a habit of physical activity might be something that we want to promote just to improve future health outcomes and improve enjoyment of life as well. Okay, so as far as the 24 hours, so again, 24-hour movement guidelines, so it's not just get this much physical activity, but we also talk about sleeping and sitting, just like we did with adults. There are different recommendations. So first of all, we're looking at children 0 to 4 years of age. There's different recommendations depending on that age group. Okay, so I'm not going to read through these. This is something that's kind of expected for you to do yourself, but you basically see that independence goes up, right? And usually the amount of physical activity that's recommended goes up, and more active play than we're not going to get the child to run laps, run around the track. 4-year-old running around the track. We want them to move around more and spend less time just sitting, but a little bit more time being unrestrained and being able to move around. Because honestly, if you just let children move, they will move. So part of this too is taking away the barriers that stop children from moving. Have you ever unleashed children? Have you ever unleashed a 4-year-old on a park? like outside, be like, go entertain yourself. For the most part, it depends on the child. That's important to say because children, we're just different, right? Most children, they just like go run around. So if we like, it's a little bit about like not holding them back from these activities. So these recommendations are really for the parents more than anything else. And then you'll notice that the requirement for sleep actually goes down as age increases. So they recommend as much as like 17 hours for those that are just newly born, and then about 10 to 13 hours for like preschoolers. Okay. As far as people that you're more likely to be working with as potential future health promoters, as far as the age group of 5 to 17, what we see now is this beautiful 4. Why 4? Because there's 4 kind of areas that we focus on. And I never noticed this before, but this was pointed out to me at an obesity conference, is like these 3 all point up. And this one points more down. You could argue that's down, but it's going down this way. These are going up this way, and this one's going down. So we want to be getting more of these things and less of this. Okay, so ideally we want to be increasing the amount of times we sweat, these children sweat, and actually what's recommended is about 60 minutes per day of like activities that make that child move a lot. And again, I'm thinking of like an 8-year-old, just like unleash them. Unleash them at a park with another friend and let them run around outside. Go out in nature, let them run around outside, and chances are they're going to work up their heart rate. Okay. In addition to like these more active pursuits, get them to move around a little bit more, several hours of a variety of structured and unstructured like physical activity, maybe helping with housework, maybe like walking around because they're doing grocery shopping with you. Maybe like if we're talking about a school environment, maybe moving from one classroom to another or moving around in class, like having activity breaks in class. And then what's recommended as far as sleep goes is 9 to 11 hours of sleep per night for those 5 to 13, and 8 to 10 hours of sleep tonight a night for those 14 to 17. And I wonder how many of y'all actually met those recommendations. I probably didn't meet those recommendations. But what is recommended to decrease is the amount of sedentary behavior. Right? So sit less as well. And like we talked about in the 24-hour movement guidelines for adults, these things all affect each other, right? Especially when we talk about sleeping and sitting. The more time we spend sleeping, or the more we like meet recommendations for sleeping, the more we have energy, perceived energy in the day to be able to be sweating, doing sweaty activities, or move around more. Right? And the less time we are maybe going to be spending sitting around. The less time we spend sitting around, the more time we have to be physically active as well. The less time we spend in front of screens, the more time we have to be active, and maybe the better sleep we get, right? These things are all related. Okay. So the Canadian Pediatric Society gives some more specifics, and the reason, like, there's a bit redundant, but it's kind of, the recommendations are going to be the same that I just showed you, but I liked that they also had ideas for what to do, right? So for infants, they recommend like a lot of tummy time and floor-based activities. For toddlers and preschoolers, they talk about how they don't understand rules very much, and they're not coordinated enough to play organized sports. So you want to like let them be a little bit autonomous and just let them move around more. Right? Walking or running, playing tag, swimming, right? And as they get older, you might want to start including more activities to, a 4-year-old might be starting to learn how to ride a bike. Maybe they have a push tricycle or a push bike as well. Okay. At around 5 to 9, that's where sports start to be more of something to be included, because ability to like follow rules is better at that age. But I thought that was important too, that more of a focus on fun than anything else, right? Short instruction, flexible rules for that age group. 10 to 12, so you'll notice the like complexity of the activity increases, or the complexity of the recommendations or the suggestions increases with age, right? So don't assume like what stage of development a person's at solely based on their age. So you want to always tailor things. But team sports, those are a good idea. Strength training can be started as young as this, but like doesn't necessarily mean like going to a gym and lifting weights. It could be things like gymnastics or other things that build strength, or things like martial arts as well. Push-ups may be something, maybe like, I don't know about like having children use Nautilus equipment at the gym, but some kind of light activities could be part of for children 10 to 12. And then 13 to 17, you see that again, rule following can be more elaborate, and like the complexity of the activities can go up as well, right? Personal fitness could be something that person starts to pursue. Maybe they're walking more to their jobs perhaps, or to school as well. Maybe they're competing more in household chores, and maybe they're competing more in maybe they're helping more in household chores, and maybe they are also participating in organized sports. And you'll notice that these recommendations, they're a little vague, as they should be, because every child is going to be different and every child's going to enjoy different things. And it's not like every 10-year-old needs to participate in organized sports, right? But is there something else that they can participate in where they still get the benefits of moving their body and building their muscles and, building their cognitive abilities as well, motor skills as well, that is tailored to that child too. Okay. But I like these recommendations because it shows kind of the progression of like less rules, more focus on fun, to, still a focus on fun, but more rules, more complexity with age as it goes up. Okay. And the parent plays a critical role in supporting physical activity for children and youth as well. And one of the ways a parent can help do that, which is hard to do, especially nowadays, is like set limits on screen time. Because it's just easy if you have a phone in front of you or a screen in front of you to just default to doing that instead of going outside. But if you don't have the option of a screen, then you find other things to do. But screens are one of the main things that keep us sitting and doing nothing, right? Even if a child participates in organized sports, that doesn't mean we would encourage them to sit for the rest of the day. And again, it depends like the level of organized sports. If they're playing like, they're Connor Bedard and they're training for hockey morning to night at age 16, playing hockey all the time, maybe they don't need any more beyond that. It really depends on the person, right? But let's say a child is just playing hockey 2 or 3 times a week. That's probably not enough for them to get all the benefits of physical activity. Of course, walking whenever you can instead of driving, active living like stairs. You want to start building. The idea is to like build these healthy practices that can hopefully carry forward with that child throughout their life, right? Carrying groceries. And then something that comes up a lot with like anything to do with children and youth where there's a caregiver there is how important it is to role model. So if you're telling a child, don't be on your phone all the time, but you're on your phone all the time, are you really saying there's anything wrong with being on your phone all the time? If you're telling a child that they should move around or help out more or go play sports, but you don't do that, then you're not setting maybe the example that you could by modeling that behavior. Kids love to follow. My friend's child is 2 years old right now, and like she just wants to do everything the adults do. And I have other friends with kids at different ages, and they just like, they're always watching you. They're always watching you, and they often want to participate, even if you might not notice they do, right? So role modeling this healthy behavior so it just becomes normalized, that's such an important part of what a caregiver can do to promote physical activity enjoyment at these younger ages. So something else that, I know there's a lot here, but I'll go through it. Something else that came up a lot when I was listening to Mark Tremblay talk about promoting physical activity. He's been like I said, he's one of the leading researchers in this area in Canada for forever and has made a huge impact on physical activity promotion. He's involved in like the participation report card, etc. One of the things that he spoke to recently is just like, it's so important to create these social settings and these like mental perspectives around physical activity where it's like a fun thing. and that it's like a lifestyle and it's just like the culture, right? And one of the things we can do with children is not just like go tell them to exercise, but to just encourage outdoor play, right? For all people generally, but especially with ages 3 to 12. So this comes from like a position statement on active outdoor play that involved a number of different stakeholders, right? When children are outside, they move more, sit less, and play longer. So that kind of speaks to what I was talking about before, like just unleash children outside and they will run around. One of the things that has come up is that parents are sometimes worried about letting their child run around outside because of the risks. But in general, outdoor play is safer than a lot of people think, right? It's not very common that, let's say, a stranger abduction could happen. Of course, this is possible, and that's a real fear that I don't want to dismiss. But the odds of it happening are very low. In contrast, the benefits that you could be giving that child through building a lifelong enjoyment of physical activity. Injuries do happen, but major trauma is uncommon. So I think they're trying to lower hesitations that parents have with these position statements. Hyperparenting, limiting physical activity. So trying to overschedule your child or really control everything your child does. That might not be the best way to promote physical activity. When they are too closely supervised, they are less active, right? Children love natural spaces and getting them just outside. I'm in BC. I'm assuming most of my students watching this are mainly in BC, British Columbia, Canada. This is nature's playground right here. And I live more or less near the beach here, and I go down there almost every day, and there are kids there. I was I don't have children, but if I did, I was just take them to the beach. It's and supervised, sure, but children just entertain themselves for hours, picking up stones, playing with sand, going in the water. And you can supervise without over managing that child as well. Okay, so outdoor play that occurs in minimally structured, free, and accessible environments facilitates socialization with peers, the community environment, and reduces feelings of isolation. So it's always good for their mental health and their social well-being too. Right? So again, we could tell kids, hey, go exercise. Or we could say, hey, let's go out in nature and play. And having a different kind of perspective might actually help build that lifelong pursuit of physical activity. Okay? You'll notice that in the recommendations, resistance training started showing up after about 10 to 12 years of age as far as a recommendation for children and youth. And yeah, there are a lot of benefits for resistance training. It can promote that foundation of an active lifestyle, competence, confidence, can be psychologically beneficial to them, can promote self-esteem, and of course, so important for building those healthy bones as well. The thing about resistance training with youth is that they might not know how to do it properly. Chances are they don't. It's when they're starting out, and YouTube are great resources on YouTube, like this one, of course. But there's a lot of crap on the internet too. So it's important that they are getting the advice from the right professionals. So they are doing the activities correct, so they're not causing unintentional harm. Okay. So there is a strong body of evidence that supports resistance training for youth on a number of different areas: muscle strength, muscle power, linear speed, agility, throw, and sport-specific performance as compared to control situations, experimental designs that have contrasted programs that promote resistance training on these various different outcomes have seen that those resistance training programs tend to have more favorable outcomes on all those different measures compared to the control conditions, right? So there is an evidence base to resistance training for children and youth. So it's not sort of for youth specifically. It's just something that you might want to promote. So now that we've seen the recommendations for physical activity in children and youth, how are we actually doing? And the answer is not so great as far as physical activity levels and a bunch of other outcomes that we're looking at, as far as the participation report card on physical activity for children and youth. So this is a report card that comes out every few years, 2 to 3 years, I actually forget how often it comes out, that basically gives children and youth a grade on how well they're doing in a bunch of different areas, right? So 14 different indicators of physical activity levels, sleep, physical activity supports, etc. What I like about this newest version, it does have an inclusion and equity lens, and it does talk about children with disabilities. It talks about racialized children and youth, girls, Indigenous children and youth, and two-spirited LGBTQ plus individuals as well. So I like that they talk about that because that hasn't shown up in other, I don't think it was in the last one, but it hasn't been in there for a long time, if it was even in the last one, okay? So it's a report card that gives basically a letter grade to how Canadian children are doing for these various different types of health indicators. And they draw on data mainly from the Canadian Community Health Survey, but also from a survey called the Cohort Study as well. So how are we doing? How are Canadians doing, right? Let's just say there's not a lot of A and B grades. There's a lot of D's and C's and not enough data and F's. So as far as are we meeting these particular benchmarks, right? So overall physical activity. So are children meeting that 60 minutes of daily moderate to vigorous physical activity? Canadian children and youth get a D grade. As far as playing enough, they get a D minus. So notice that each category has a threshold, and then this is based on the percentage of people that are actually meeting those recommendations. Okay, physical education, something that comes up a lot in this report card is that there's many areas, especially when it comes to these different groups, where there's not enough data to actually say how well we're doing, okay? But it ain't great is one of the main messages from here. So percentage of children and youth who meet the sleep duration, this one actually surprises me, is a B, right? So we have a higher percentage that are meeting it. As far as children and youth that are meeting all the 24-hour movement behavior guidelines, it's less than 50%. Okay, information on physical literacy and physical fitness is more incomplete. As far as the percentage of parents who facilitate physical activity, or parents who parents who are physically active with their kids, more of a C grade. And then as far as schools go and their ability to promote physical activity, it's a B minus. Okay. As far as the community supports and government supports, they're okay. So for community environment, percentage of children or parents who perceive their community municipality in doing a good job. So it's more like perception based. And then for government, evidence of leadership and commitment to providing physical activity opportunities to all children and youth. So there are supports in place to promote these things, but children are still not getting it. So what's going on? And it's kind of hard to say. Some of this data was collected during COVID, so that was part of the issue there as well. But these grades are very similar to grades in the past as well. We often get like D's and C's for these, which quite honestly is similar to a lot of the world. And it's hard to say what's actually going to make a change in these areas. Of course, if you are a caregiver to your own care receivers, children and youth, you can have an influence on them by role modeling. If you have a influence in your community or at a school or in some place where children and youth are, you can have an influence there as well. But I'm going to say that I don't know what the answer is as far as making sure that children and youth are getting enough physical activity to make sure that they are getting all the benefits from it. And one of the things Mark Tremblay said in his talk on this is that in the only place where he's really seen it make a massive difference at a population level is when the culture changes. So for instance, the culture of Vancouver proper and Montreal proper I'd say Quebec in general, they're active places. We have the Vancouver, BC in general, and Quebec in general have the lowest rates of physical inactivity across the country. And part of why that might be is that it's part of the culture. And you can say in Vancouver it's part of the climate promotes it, but you can't say that about Quebec. Quebec, it's freaking cold in the winter, and their winters through all of Quebec are brutal, are potentially super brutal. That's where my husband's from, and I go every year, and it's brutal there in the winter. But it's cultural. It's like built in. It's like what people do. It's what families do. My husband's family, they've just like always been active. They're just like a ski family, and they're a hiking family. That's like part of the culture of the family. But there's a lot of the culture of Canada is like sitting around watching TV, playing video games. And I'm not saying they're individually at fault for the low levels of physical activity, but it's hard to say how we change the culture fully around the family and the like friends of children as far as how they perceive physical activity. And again, this kind of speaks to our concept of like system science, and how if we want to change a system, one of the main things that we might want to focus on is changing our mental models around things. So if the mental model around physical activity is that it's hard and it sucks and it's only for athletes and you have to get 150 minutes to make any difference, maybe that's not going to promote physical activity. But if we change the mental model around physical activity to like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. I get to meet friends. I get to see my friends. I like feel so good afterwards. I get to go into nature. It's so fun. It's not boring. If we like change the mental models to that, and that's not easy to do, but that is something to focus on. Maybe that starts changing some of these health indicators. But it's really hard to say, because people have been trying to promote health in children and youth forever. And it's not getting too much worse in like the last 10 years. It's kind of stayed about the same, but it's not getting that much better either. So how do we change the culture? And again, this is a little bit more like thinking in systems, which is not for the sake of this unit here, but it's something we're going to talk about a bit later.